everybody from Tucson, Arizona. This is Diane Kelly Nygaard. Yes, I just got married and still getting used to the last name, so bear with me here. And today I'm going to introduce Mr. Jayson Mamaclay, and he's the Vice President of Norman Professional Services, and they provide fractional CFO and transformational accounting services for small business owners who are primarily in the professional services business. He's a CPA who has been at Price Waterhouse, and he brings big business thinking around money systems and controls to the small business entrepreneur, which is really important. They help business owners forecast cash flow, calculate their company and job profitability. That's kind of nice, and build understanding of their numbers so they can be in a better position to get more time back in their lives, more sleep at night, more money in their pockets, and grow more value for the business should they eventually want to sell it. And that's where we're coming from today is how do you plan for a profitable exit? And these are all critical things that you have to do along the way, not wait until it's time to hopefully sell the business. So we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between a CPA. I'm sure most of you have an accountant, a CPA who you're already doing business with, and that's fine and that's great, and you need those people. But when you reach a certain milestone in your business, which is $1 million or more of annual revenue, generally, sometimes before that, you need additional information from your numbers. And this is where a fractional CFO comes in. So Jayson, take it away and tell us how those different roles work on behalf of the small business owner.
Yeah, absolutely happy to go through that. And there are lots of other roles too, beyond just the two kind of alphabet soup that you had just mentioned here. And I'd love to be able to take a moment to go through each of them. And Diane, feel free to interrupt me if there's anything that you'd love for me to elaborate on even further along the
Sure,
way.
and we'll just make this kind of conversational. So
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think about a financial support team that supports a business owner. It's not just one person, it's a team of people. And you mentioned a very important team member, the CPA, who kind of sits external to the organization, assists with their main job is around mitigating tax liability, right? Like they're responsible for the forms that you and your business need to go ahead and file. And they are expected to have a pretty good grasp of what it is that you do and how you do it. But their main focus is researching all of the federal and state and local regulations to put you in the most advantageous position as it relates to tax refunds and credits or things that you should be looking out for in terms of tax exposure that could affect your business or even potentially affect you personally as well. And there are a variety of financial vehicles and tools to help you put yourself in better positions than if you didn't get armed with that information. I mean, Diane, you encounter that a lot with some of the things that you and your business work with clients as well, right?
Yeah, one of the first things we see is how many business owners want to mitigate their taxes by throwing all their personal expenses into their
Ooh,
business.
I don't
Yeah.
know if I want
So,
that.
yeah, exactly. So, and some CPAs are very much advocates of that and allow that to happen. But between what you do and what I do, we know that that skews the numbers big time. Oh, and it devalues the business.
It lowers the valuation of the
Yeah,
business dramatically.
yeah.
Exactly. So, are you robbing Peter to feed Paul, right? So, while you
Cut
make
your
it the
nose off to
short term,
spite your face.
I know, right? Do you get that short-term gain and benefits of mitigating taxes in ways that aren't tied to the business, at the risk of lowering a future business valuation? It definitely is important. And granted, smart valuations experts that go in and really dig into the details of the information should be able to extract out what's personal versus not. But then you just end up paying a lot of money for people to do simple arithmetic that
Yeah.
probably didn't need to belong in the business in the first place, or at least categorized in the way that it affects taxes. So that actually kind of takes me to my second role that I'd love to go into, if that's all right with you, Diane.
Absolutely.
So another role that's important for an organization is just your day-to-day bookkeeper. They're the people that are responsible for handling all of the individual transactions that go into it, whether it be your customer invoicing, the bills that you need to pay for utilities or rent or for legal or for insurance, your payroll. They're the people that are managing the day-to-day inflow and outflow. And in all honesty, is one of the first outsourced activities that you really should look into as a business owner.
Yeah.
While finances can be really sensitive, and it could feel difficult to trust another person with managing the in and outflow of your cash. In all honesty, getting that off of your plate, especially if you're not a numbers person, is one of the most important things, to just stay on top of what your business is doing and how it's performing, so that come tax time and you're working with your CPA, you're not scrambling at the last minute trying to figure out what goes where in the different categories. Your
Yeah.
bookkeeper is responsible for keeping track of that and putting things in proper categories. And if they're doing their job right, they're going to be asking you, hey, what is this specific expense for?
Right.
Related to the business. And if it's not, if it's a personal thing, then there's a different bucket that you could put it in. It's okay that it got paid for by company funds or by a company credit card, as long as it's categorized in a way that's really easy for a CPA, for business valuation specialists, for other people to recognize what is this personal expense for. And
Yeah.
that
We try
typically
to
is the
tell
owner's
them,
job.
don't commingle business and
Yeah,
personal. Just
exactly.
don't,
Yeah.
right? And, to that point, I mean, there's some latitude there. Maybe an employee benefit is massages for all the employees because you want to keep them healthy and happy. That can be an employee benefit, and that's
Yeah.
legit, right? But putting in your boat and all these other high-end things just doesn't hang well when you're looking for a business value. So,
Bingo.
and we work really closely with the bookkeepers. Another big mistake I see that business owners make, and in fact, I made this mistake when I started my life and health insurance agency. My husband at the time decided that we were going to save money and do our own bookkeeping. Big mistake. If you're not a bookkeeper, don't do your bookkeeping.
Yeah, just straight up. It's
No.
literally one of the first administrative things that you should pass along for sure. It saves you so much time, saves you so much headache. And again, I understand that it finances are very, very close to the heart, but it is truly such a lifesaver to get someone who knows what they're doing in categorizing transactions properly. That just makes things cleaner at the end of
Yep,
the day.
yep, absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned a kind of an important thing related to things like employee benefits and whatnot. And among that also could be like employee reimbursements for things, right? In
Sure,
terms of
sure.
payroll. So
Mileage, stuff like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so you may have a pretty robust payroll and expense reimbursement process, but this also starts to introduce another role that I think is important within an organization. A role that's really important is called the controller role. And often this would be the business owner for a while because they're there reviewing everything that's going on. Maybe they're the final approver on things and whatnot. But the controller, if you think about its name, I'm going to do the bad thing in grammar school is define a word using the word itself. A controller is responsible for the controls in the company. They're responsible for making sure that when data gets put together, that it's actually reporting out accurately on what's going on. Your standard financial statements, balance sheet, income statement, your statement of cash flows, but not just putting together the reports. They're making sure that the information in the reports is true. So they're
Exactly.
mapping, hey, what's in your QuickBooks against what did the bank actually say happened, right? You may have your bookkeeper or CPA do it, but they're performing a controller role responsibility as a result. In addition to checking to make sure that the stuff that happened actually happened, they're checking to see, is the stuff happened something that we expect to happen? So say that you've got like your miscellaneous office supplies like $3,000, $3,000, $3,500, $8,000, $3,500, $4,000, $3,000. It's the controller's job to go, well, hold on, that $8,000 is weird. And let's look into that. Because if you don't have someone looking into what your finances are saying and what the transactions are, it's possible that maybe something got slipped into employee reimbursements that really shouldn't have been there. And maybe you just let your system kind of roll with it
Yeah.
without a second check or guess. And so another important role of the controller function is to be able to identify when anomalies happen in reports, especially if there's a potential risk of fraud, which absolutely can affect a business's valuation if
Yeah.
things that don't belong in there slip into the cracks.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. I've actually had a couple clients be embezzled from, which no employer ever wants to think it's going to happen to them because they
Yeah.
have trusted employees.
Mhm.
But I'm sorry, but in this day and age, you have to have some eyes on it. And I tell people who have bookkeepers or controllers, you still have to have oversight and make sure that everything's legit. So if you layer that oversight, chances are things aren't going to fall through the cracks, things aren't going to float away, and you'll have a better handle on exactly where things are going and why.
Yeah, exactly. So like when a business owner is still wearing that controller hat, that you're busy doing a gazillion things
Yeah.
and really having that segregation of duties there and that extra support, that second set of eyes is so incredibly important. So it technically is the role of the controller overseeing kind of where money is flowing within the organization and to be
Yeah.
able to go and kind of cite out what's going on. Now, like the business owner should watch the controller too to make sure that they're
Yeah.
doing their job and that
Yeah.
they're not like
Yeah.
potentially at risk of stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, that is important there.
Yeah. I was working
Um,
with a small business, and it's a mom and pop, and then the son is running the business, and there's no communication.
mm,
They have no idea what's going on with their numbers. Somebody's doing
mm,
the QuickBooks, but nobody's having that conversation. So they're totally out of touch.
mm.
And it's one of those dynamics where you couldn't get them to talk to each other,
Oh,
which
shucks.
is really hard. And that happens sometimes more often with family owned businesses.
And in all honesty, like that's, I agree with that. That might not be that uncommon just because there are only so many hands that go around and that
Yeah,
there's this understood or implicit trust when it is family that's there. But
yeah,
you still got to have the systems in
yep,
place. You still got to have those
yep,
checks in place just in case.
absolutely agreed.
And it's important too from a business valuation perspective
Yep,
that you can't a business's value isn't generated from like the familial bonds that
yep,
exist between the
yep,
workers, like the people who make the business go and
yeah,
grow regardless of their relationship to each other. It's the operations that
yeah.
generates value for
And I
businesses.
tell mom and pop businesses that at the $1 million mark, they have to stop operating as a mom and pop and operate as an enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And, commonly I hear them say, well, my business is my baby. I said, well, you better cut the umbilical cord, right? Because you
Yeah.
need to treat that as an asset, which it is, right? And if you
Yeah.
keep treating it as your baby, you're not going to get the growth, you're not going to get the value out of it. So those are really important components.
Yeah, 100% for sure. And like one of the things that's important when thinking about the business at an enterprise level, is kind of as you teed it up, is getting that financial strategy in place so that you are getting a return on that asset, a return on that investment. And that's where being able to leverage the power of a future-facing CFO can really help out in making that a reality, whether it's on a fractional basis, kind of like what we do at Norman Professional Services, or hiring someone fully in-house if you have the capital arrangement to be able to do so. But taking that hat off of your head as the business owner and getting expert advice on being able to help grow that investment is so dramatically important. So if you think about if you're sitting back and you're saying, well, I already have a bookkeeper or I already have my CPA, really remember that their main focus is to make sure that historical information is reported correctly.
They're
And
looking
that's a
backward, right?
it's a backward, yeah, and it's a
Yeah,
very specific skill set.
yeah,
It's a skill set around investigation, data entry, data accuracy. It's a matter of like making sure that there's clear reporting in that regard. Those are very important skill sets, but they might not be the same set of skill sets that are required for future strategic thinking,
yeah.
forecasting, being able to create what if scenarios
Yeah.
and modeling that behavior. That might be a completely different type of skill set compared to that of historical accuracy. So think the comparison I like to think is B for bookkeeper, B for backwards. F in CFO, F CFO for finance, F for future as
I love
well.
it. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
totally.
exactly it. Yeah.
So a fractional CFO can help you out with thinking, all right, what if so again, there's that what if scenario. What if I were to consider changing my pricing strategy? Or what if I want to open up this additional revenue stream or close a revenue stream? How do I know if a certain type of project or product is more profitable versus another one? Like that's another big question. And what changes could I make to be able to improve the profitability of those things? How can I hire XYZ people over time and map out what is my return on investment in hiring those human resources to help me generate more revenue? Because they're not making revenue on day one, likely. So you're going to need to float payroll for a little bit before they truly open up that opportunity for greater revenue. How do I forecast that cash flow so that I don't run out of cash? How do I develop a cash floor that I'm comfortable with, that I know that my business will keep the lights on even if hiccups happen along the way, so that I know beyond that cash floor, I could make strategic investments in the company, or I could pay myself a little more, right? So like,
Yeah.
and that is where value gets generated, is the business's ability to be able to create this positive cash flow and clear opportunities for continued investment to grow and scale a business. And that is huge value multiplier right there.
Yeah, it sounds like benchmarking. So you're benchmarking different things. At this point, we can afford to hire another employee, or we need the other employee now. And yes, it's going to be a negative for a short time period, but we've calculated out where that ROI will come in, and we have a calculated risk, not just a risk, right?
Yeah.
And this is really hard for a lot of small business owners because they're kind of caught in that cash flow crunch, right? Where they ebb and flow, or they have to expend more to grow, to scale, or they have cyclical things, seasonal issues. So having somebody like you helping them balance that out and making sure they have a more even flow instead of like this and this is pretty much what you do, I hear.
Yeah, that is precisely it. And especially if like the business owner still kind of hangs on tight to that financial strategy
Yeah.
hat, right? There's no prize for wearing the most hats in
There's no
entrepreneurship.
strategy. They're just hanging on.
Yeah, there's that too. If you're able to release that and lean into and trust in some of that outside guidance, looking at the data and saying, all right, well, what are the key questions you want to answer? And how can we build forecasts to help ease what some of those options are so that they feel more, that you have a greater grasp around them, that they feel more real, that they feel more understandable. So it's not just all guesswork.
They're meaningful,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, exactly. I love
yeah.
it. A meaningful understanding of the options that you have at hand,
Well,
so you could make stronger business decisions on things that are aligned with your overall goals and your company's
and it all
values.
fits together in the plan. So you're following a plan. So it's not like out and left base and like, oh, we're going to fly out and do this when it doesn't, it's not cohesive with what their strategic planning is, which is where
Mhm.
we really want to come in from the exit planning standpoint. They have to have a strategic plan. I don't care where they are in their business life. They can be
Mhm.
beginning, middle, or toward the end. They have to have a strategic plan for a planned exit at any given time because, oh, somebody might come in and make an offer, right?
Yeah.
Do they know if that offer is good? Do they even want to consider it? However, on the other side of it, to your what ifs, exits aren't always voluntary either. So by
Mm.
having a functional business and having this flowing the way it should along the way and having cash reserves, should something happen to the business owner that gets sick, hurt, or die, which comes back to my bail as far as
Mhm.
getting them key person life insurance and disability coverage and all that.
Yeah.
Those things need to be in place because it shores up that financial foundation. But if they have something going that is a progressive thing and they're growing and they have that profitability, those impacts aren't going to be as great on that business. And it buys them options.
Right. Right, 100%.
Yeah.
And you don't need to, I think there are, it can feel intimidating being like, oh my gosh, I need to have my entire plan ready before I could go and speak with people.
Yeah.
That is not the truth. You can get help in creating important components of that plan, important help from you, Diane, and being able to create those financial structures that protect people from those significant events, disrupting what that plan could be. It builds the knowledge that's necessary to plan for a proper a proper exit strategy, and kind of like you were saying, what are the benchmarks? What are the markers to say, oh, okay, this is a thought or conversation path that we should be going down towards.
Right.
When we work with clients, often the first thing that we work with them, you just mentioned it earlier too, like if you're at a point where you're sweating over payroll, let's form that cash flow forecasting plan so that you're not sweating over that, and that if there, we won't be able to magically generate cash right from the get-go, but we may be able to say, here are options to be able to acquire capital, and let's look strategically at the operations of your business, which that is what increase, like that is the source of the value for business valuation. Let's look at your business and see what tweaks do we need to make in order to improve cash flow and profitability over time, so that you're not just kind of sitting back and resting on your laurels saying, if I just keep doing what I've been doing this whole
Right.
time, everything will be okay. If you're already in a position where you're just worried and sweating over payroll, then you don't want to just keep doing what you're doing, because you want things to change, you
True.
want things to improve. And so let's talk about what are going to be those things that will be the best needle movers to be able to make things happen. Is it your pricing? Is it your volume of clients, and so needing to generate more marketing, more results in the marketing and sales perspective? Is it that you don't have enough team yet to go and support the volume of work that you have, and how are you getting cost-effective team members to efficiently provide for clients? Is it that some of the additional spending that's out there, maybe you should cut down on that commingling expenses
Yeah.
to make sure that everything's okay, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we sit back and we talk about what are the things that need to change at a baseline level to help you get to a better cash floor and cash flow position, so you don't have to be worrying and sweating things out day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. So pricing is really important, especially now with inflation the way it is. I know a lot
Mm,
of companies have experienced a lot of increases in their own acquisitions of supplies and services and other things. And sometimes they're hesitant to pass it on to their customers or
mhm,
clients, right? Because they feel bad. But unfortunately, it's a reality that we're living in right now. And they have to keep the cash flow,
mhm.
right?
Yep.
Labor issues have been an issue, finding quality employees, putting the golden handcuffs on them to hopefully keep them for any length of time. It seems to be a
Mm,
very fluid environment where people are leaving and going to additional opportunities in a shorter time period. So, the whole trajectory of the small business has really changed, especially since
yeah.
COVID, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree that the landscape has wildly transformed, not just from an economic perspective, but kind of as you've described, what the workforce is looking for in terms of how they are going through their careers as well, continues to transform. Now, granted, some of those evolutions generationally have existed even pre-COVID,
Yes.
but have certainly been amplified even further now as people are very choosy about how they spend their money and how they spend their time.
Mhm.
When you mention inflation, yeah, it's been certainly more on the forefront in recent years, but there was never a time where I think the economy was expected to not inflate,
Well, it's
right?
not flat, that's for sure.
Exactly. And
We don't
so,
want it flat in reality, but yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly. I mean, that is just sort of the natural progression of the economy, is that inflation is a common and regular occurrence. Its magnitude may vary year on year, but at no point in time is everything expected to stay flat, just stay
right,
the same, and
right,
not increase at all.
right.
So if you are a business owner that is sitting there and going, well, I can't increase my prices, you really just have to look around and go, no, everything is increasing.
Yeah,
And if I don't do so, then I'm only hurting myself and my team
yeah.
in keeping things stagnant. And while it may be for the benefit of the customer, customers themselves are indeed seeing inflationary pressures elsewhere. And yes, it may be true that they're going to need to make important like cash expenditure decisions.
Mhm.
And so overall, like there may be some attrition there naturally.
Mhm.
But if you aren't increasing your prices, you are letting you and your business fall behind the curve,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
But having
Um,
good counsel, like somebody like you who can help them walk through that. A lot of times, the biggest problem for the business owner, the entrepreneur, is we're trying to do it by ourselves. We're trying to
mm,
figure it out. So, having good counsel from somebody like you can actually sit down with them, work with them, and counsel them on here is a realistic increase, right?
mhm,
I checked the marketplace in your industry. This is viable. This is doable, and then they
yeah.
have that comfort that they're not jumping out into left base and losing, like I said, a market share.
Right, exactly. The rule of thumb that I know that my the founder of the company, Walter Miller, likes to say is if no one's saying no to your prices, then you're pricing too low.
That's a good thumb nail there to remember. Yeah,
Exactly.
if you're getting the lion's share of the business and all your competition is suffering for it, then you're obviously giving it away.
Yeah, and it might
Right.
not even be that your
Yeah,
competition is suffering for it
yeah,
or that you're
yeah.
getting the lion's share
They're getting
either.
the
If
higher end. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. So
yeah,
so that's just a rule of thumb is
yeah,
that if
yeah,
you're experiencing no price pushback
yeah,
ever,
yeah,
then there's a chance that you are leaving money on the table.
yeah. Let's talk debt. Okay, that's one of
Mm,
your talking points, and you and I belong to a large national mastermind, Pinnacle Global, and one of the things that our mentor Allison Maslin says all the time is prepare ahead of time and don't be afraid to get into debt if it's a calculated risk to scale. And sometimes to scale, you have to take that risk. And I know a lot of small business owners are risk adverse, right? They're
yeah,
afraid, they don't want to get into debt, and they can't grow that way.
yeah. It can be very difficult, can be very challenging too, for sure. Yeah. So when I think about when I think about debt, a form of debt that so many people are familiar with is just running the credit card, right? Like that technically is debt, right?
Yes.
And those that are an effective use of using the credit card is making sure that you're paying that balance off every month, so you're not accruing the exorbitant interest rates that credit cards have usually by default. Now, if you have a 0% interest rate card, fantastic. But that's a familiar form of debt that a lot of people feel really comfortable using. Now, where where that specific kind of debt can get really scary is if you don't keep up with paying off those balances each month because those interest rates are so high. Why is that dangerous? Because then you're letting a principal balance sit and now you have to pay this extra expensive interest on top of that. And if you don't successfully pay that down, then you're paying interest on what's left and on the interest that was put on too as well. And it just compounds in a way that can get out of hand very quickly. When I think about what people are fearful of debt is that exact phenomenon, is that, oh my gosh, I'm going to need to be paying out the wazoo related stuff if I let it get out of control. Credit card debt is one of the easiest things to let get out of control if you aren't keeping tabs on it. But the overall concept of debt, and I want to impress upon folks, is that there's other types that are out there. You can get lower, more advantaged interest rate loans from the SBA, working with the SBDC or working with a community lender to get you better interest rates than the mid-teens percents that you experience on credit cards. And if you allow that to be a source of capital for you, then the marker that you need to be thinking about, perhaps with the consultation and help of expert advice from CFOs, is how are you going to take that money and make a better return on investment than the interest rate that's there? The interest rate is called your cost of capital.
Mhm.
That's what it's going to cost you to borrow that money because it's the interest that you're paying on it. You pay back the money and a little bit extra, right? If you're able to make more money than that cost, then it's a good investment decision. And the more money you're able to make beyond that cost, the better investment decision that it is.
Yeah.
So when taking out the debt, you want to think about how is this money going to help my business out in the long run? How is it going to multiply my ability to make revenue and consequently and hopefully profit down to the bottom line? And how is that profit going to be funding in multiplying factors that cost of capital, that cost of acquisition of capital from there. And another thing about debt is that you don't need to pay it all back right away. You could create a 5-year loan, a 7-year loan. A lot of us during the pandemic took out a 30-year loan, effectively took out a mortgage
Yeah.
for our business. And you don't need to pay it back right away. As long as you are consistently making more than what the interest is, your return on you using the cash is greater than the interest rates, then it makes sense to hold on to the debt. If you anticipate that you're not going to be making as much as the interest, like in credit cards, that's a pretty high interest rate, you should pay off that debt. And that's why we always say pay off credit card debt first, because it's the highest interest rate. Right. So I hope that those few nuggets of information may be helpful for the listeners here in saying, hey, we're familiar with a kind of debt, and there are cheaper kinds of debt. And this is how you should be looking at it, as a fuel to make more money that pays for that debt.
Right. And again, working with somebody like you, an external CFO, would allow them to have somebody to run that by and figure out which kind of debt is the best for that particular situation, that particular company, and the terms and everything else, because there's a multitude of opportunities out there for debt. I mean, I get 100%. Information every day in my email. We want to give you just been approved for X number of dollars, right? You're like, yeah, right. My right arm, left arm, first and second born, and
Right.
So how much should an owner be able to take out of the business on a draw?
Ooh, okay. So that's definitely a really good question, because especially thinking about it from a business valuation standpoint, if you are pulling money out of the company for your own personal benefit, those dollars are not available for the business for strategic investments. But if you don't have any strategic investments to make, then of course, go ahead and feel free to invest in yourself and be able to secure that benefit. The rule of thumb that I know that my boss Walter Miller likes sharing with folks is, in terms of your draw and your payroll. So if you're a W-2'd on your payroll as well, so like all of the compensation that you get from an organization, if that dollar amount hits about 20% of your top line revenues, then the wheels on the bus will start to rattle a little bit. It's not a death sentence by any means, right. But if you're feeling some pressure, take a look and evaluate, all right, should I be siphoning as much cash out of the organization as I am right now? That's when we start to look at and monitor. There are definitely organizations that pull 30, 40, 50% out because they are very lean at a high value, high margin that's out there. So exactly. So by no means is this a hard and fast prescription. But if we hear, oh, I'm a little worried about cash flow, normally one of the first places that we go is, well, how much money is the owner taking out? And if it approaches that 20% mark, we might go, hey, let's lighten up on that a little bit, build up the cash reserves, strengthen the operations and its ability to make a cash return, and then we could return back to some stronger draws out there.
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's looking forward and doing the projections and saying maybe it's a temporary thing because they're having to expend more on payroll, to point. So the owner would naturally, I assume, I've been in that situation, draw back on what they're taking to promote that growth and to cover those extra expenses during the time period of the growth, and hopefully again get the return pretty quickly in there.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, Jayson, I know that I've kept you on here for a little bit longer than what we normally do, and I really appreciate everything that you've given us. I hope that our audience is going to glean some really good information from this. Folks, if you want to reach Jayson, I've got all of his information under the video, and you're welcome to reach out to him. I'm sure he's happy to answer any questions. Jayson's been a great referral source for me personally, and a great friend, and I really enjoy working with him, and he's always smiling. So.
Diane, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to share this time with you, and I always value our connections and our conversations. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be with you today.
We'll call you the smiling CFO.
Oh, there we go. I love it.
There are worse things to be called, right?
Hey, true. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. I am Diane Kelly Nygaard, and I'm a certified exit planner. And no matter where you are in your business, again, you need to have a plan, a strategic financial plan, a strategic exit plan. All these things are going to come to play at some point in your life, and maybe sooner rather than later. So you may as well get started now. So thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all in the next session.